Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Warren at the CBRC. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Just a couple of words about logistics. This is our first webinar of the year, so a few of you may have forgotten how they go. We'll pause for questions a couple of times, once in the middle and once at the end. In the meantime, if you have questions, you can type them into your GoToMeeting panel, or you can just save them and ask them verbally when we pause. For now, I've got everybody on mute, so if in case anybody is playing music or making noise, we don't have to listen to you, but we'll unmute you when it's time for questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I think this briefing should be fairly quick. Wanted to start off with this picture from here in the Salt Lake Valley. This is my dog. This is last week above the Salt Lake Valley, and then that what looks like an ocean behind it is actually the inversion, and that's been sort of symptomatic of the weather, especially on this side of the basin. So we'll jumping into the outline. We'll talk about what happened in December. We'll elaborate on the difference between what we're seeing here on the western side of our forecast area as opposed to the eastern side. Then we'll jump into the snow supply forecast. So in terms of the monthly precipitation analysis, looking back to the beginning of the water year, you can see, you'll see it here in a second. I have a little bit of delay. There we go. Okay. So in October, we had a really good October for the northeastern part of the basin, not so much for the northwestern part of the basin. And this is going to be a theme we'll talk about a lot through the course of this briefing, that the western side of the basin, the Great Basin, and then the western part of the Colorado Basin hasn't done nearly as well as the eastern side, and that's reflected in the October precipitation. November did very well in the lower basin, but not so well up north. And then December, again, had the same kind of pattern we saw in October, with the eastern side doing much better than the western side. So if we add those all up, the seasonal precipitation anomalies, anywhere that's sort of green and colder colors is above normal, the red and orange colors is below normal. You can see the light bluish color, 110 to 129% of normal in the northeastern part of the basin, covering sort of wide swaths, near normal in the extreme upper part of the Colorado, and then below normal in the Great Basin, the Duchesne, and then further south, a lot of the lower basins, but also been below normal. So that was as of the first of the month. If we look at what's happened over the last week, not a lot. There has been one little storm moved through. You can see the color coding on the right is the legend. The dark blue color is up to half an inch of precipitation, and then the green is up to an inch of precipitation. So you can see that same kind of pattern with the extreme eastern part of the basin doing fairly well over the last week, and everywhere else is not doing so well. So if we look at the snow, how does that manifest itself at the SNOTEL sites? I'll show those first as a percent of average. You can see the mountains in the western side of our forecast area are largely below normal. Lots of oranges and reds. Oranges are 50 to 75% of normal. The reds are 25 to 50% of normal. And then lots of greens and even some blues on the eastern side, indicating near normal, 90 to 110% of average. The blues are up in the 110 to 125%. The percentile ranking chart shows a similar story, but it's a little bit more nuanced. There's a lot of the sort of orangish colors in the west, and then in the east we see a lot of the greens, indicating near the middle part of the distribution. The one note on this, the green colors is 25 to 75 percentile, so that's a fairly large category. It captures a lot of different parts of the distribution. Also wanted to point out the red. These are there's only a few of these in the Great Basin mostly. These are SNOTEL sites that are showing their lowest recorded snow water equivalent on record for today. So there's a few of those, and they're all here in the Great Basin. Okay, so we look at the time series for the different SNOTEL or different snow groups that we have on our website. So just as a reminder, we're going to start off looking at the upper green above Flaming Gorge. This is an average of the SNOTEL sites that are roughly included in the purple circle on the left. The green line is this year. The blue line is the average, the historical average. The purple line is the historical median. So you can see the median is a little bit below the average. and then the red line is what happened last year. And so far, all four of those lines are tracking pretty close together. This particular snow group is 92% of its historical median, a little bit less than that as a percent of average. I threw in the Duchesne this time. We don't normally look at the Duchesne separate, but because it is really an outlier in the Colorado Basin, you can see the green line's been pretty flat for the last week and a half or so, and it's well below average or median, 79% of median, and that's again because of the storm tracks that we've seen so far this year. So if we shift back over to the east, most of the upper Colorado Basin looks more like this. This is the upper Colorado main stem, which looks at all of the snow tell sites above Cameo. Very roughly, the snow tell sites are inside that purple circle. Here we're right in between the average and median lines, doing fairly well. Similar story in the Gunnison. The Gunnison started off better. It's been dry for the last week and a half or so, but right in between average and median. And a similar story for the San Juan. Looks a lot like the Gunnison. The lower Colorado, if we look at the areas in the Arizona, New Mexico portion of our area, you can see that they're not doing as well, only 61% average. It's been pretty dry down there since the November storms that they saw. That will change later this week, but not by a lot. And then finally here in the Great Basin, just showing the creeks that drain into the Salt Lake Valley, also 69% of median, not doing well at all in the Great Basin. And this is a similar story we see elsewhere in the Great Basin. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. Wanted to talk a little bit about the weather forecast and then the climate forecast before I get to the water supply forecast. This is the precipitation forecasted by our Weather Prediction Center for the next 7 days. It's a little bit more optimistic than it was yesterday. Looks really good for the Pacific Northwest. They really need the moisture up there. It's been pretty dry. Here we've got basically one kind of scraggly storm going through this weekend. I'll show in more detail. And then you can see more moisture expected in the southeastern part of the country. So in terms of the moisture here, right now I wanted to say something about the polar vortex because we've heard so much about it in the news. This chart is showing the jet stream, the 500 millibar height across the country in the green contours, and then the shading indicates the precipitation. And you can see this really deep trough kind of centered over eastern Canada right now, and it extends all the way down into the southeastern states. These height values are really low by meteorological standards for this part of the country, even for this time of year. So that's what they're talking about when they talk about the polar vortex. You can see out here in the west, we've got a ridge going on, not much precipitation. The next storm starting to impact the Pacific Northwest, and that's a trend we're going to see continue over the next few days. So for our basin, we're looking at a series of what I'm calling smallish storms that are going to move through starting Thursday evening and continuing really through the weekend. They're not going to. This storm's not going to be a savior for the water situation by any stretch of the imagination. The impacts are going to be fairly great for the Pacific Northwest, but here in our basin, the maximum accumulations we're expecting to see are going to be around 1.5 inches. You can see the storm kind of breaks apart. There's a branch of the jet stream further north, and then there's a branch. The models have been sort of biting off on this more and more. There's a branch of the jet stream that extends south into Arizona and Mexico and even Mexico, bringing some moisture down there, but not a lot. So fast forwarding to Sunday, this is the same storm. You can see it's kind of moved back to the east coast, and then there's sort of another short wave consistent with the same sort of long wave pattern moving through the west. And again, it's going to brush our northern part of our area, bringing some precipitation, but this is not a major storm. And then after that, things really ridge out next week, where it looks like we should be dry again by Monday, Tuesday, and stay dry for next week. These are the model solutions. You'll see in a second. I'll pause. There we go. So these are the model solutions for the different ensemble members from the weather model for Thursday of next week. And I just put this in here to show that there's a lot of variation, as there always is when we go more than a week out. But in most of the cases, the color contouring here is precipitation, and you don't see really in any of these any significant precipitation over our basin. So the models are pretty confident that it's going to be dry after we get through this next period of storminess for a while. We look way out, in fantasy land in the weather models, they're kind of all over the place. Some of them are showing a storm, some of them are showing more ridging. So beyond the weather, the El Nino conditions just really quickly continue to be very near normal. The lower left panel, when you see the slide advance, there you go. There's lots of white in the sea surface temperature anomalies in the tropical Pacific Ocean. So we're really sort of as normal as you can get, or as neutral as you can get in terms of La Nina, El Nino. So not much to talk about there. And then the climate forecasts that come out of the Climate Prediction Center have continued to show some increased probability for dryness in the Pacific Southwest, centered over Arizona, New Mexico. They've kept that shading really south of the Upper Basin and south of the Great Basin for the most part. So, not a lot of information there either. Two more things I wanted to show before I jump into the forecast. One is the soil moisture. We showed this in December. You'll see the slide come up in a second. There it is. This is our soil moisture states as of November 1st, so kind of representing it as we go into the cool season. And they reflect the story that we were talking about last fall, where we had a very active monsoon season, particularly over the upper Colorado, the eastern part of the basin. Not quite as much over the Great Basin and the western part of the basin, but still some places that have done fairly well there. And then also we had, you recall, a particularly active period down in the lower basin and especially in the upper Gila, although things have dried out there since. And then finally, just to kind of broad stroke it, if you look at the stream flow percentile rankings from the USGS, this is from their Water Watch page, as of October 1st, it paints a roughly consistent story with higher than average base flow in the state of Colorado, sort of more near normal and below normal in the state of Utah, consistent with this same pattern we've been talking about. So with that, let me take a pause and see if there's any questions.
Mute on.
Oops.
Mute off.
Wrong button.
The conference is now in talk mode.
Does anybody have any questions so far? Hearing none, we'll jump into the forecast.
The conference is now in silent mode.
Okay, so these are the water supply forecasts. This is a screenshot from our new webpage. We just published these minutes ago, so these are hot off the press. The highlights are basically near average over most of the upper Colorado. You see a lot of these green triangles. Green triangles indicate 90 to 110% of average. There's a few of the lighter blue ones, 110 to 130% of average. And then as you move further west, you start to see a lot of the yellow and red colors indicating the below average. So the major factors that go into these forecasts are just what we talked about, the early season storms and the patterns of those storms, and then the antecedent conditions. This is a map I wanted to highlight. Something new we're doing this year is a map of our daily ESP forecast. It looks about the same as the official forecast. There's maybe more points on here, but this is updated every day. So this is as of today, or as of yesterday, I guess. So if you're wanting to see something updated in between the first of the months, this is a pretty cool thing to go look at. You can look at these as either a percent of average or a percent of median. And then this is the same information using our forecast tool. You'll see it in a second. There it is. So you can see the numbers over here, and the numbers are showing the forecast and then the percent of average for that forecast. So if you sort of quickly scan around, you can see that the numbers are pretty close to 100% over a lot of the area. The Great Basin, again, is the major exception. There we see numbers that go as low as, I think the lowest one I saw was 40-ish% somewhere. last one I see here is like 50%, but in the 50-60% range for sure. So looking at a few specific forecasts, we're going to start in the upper green. This is the inflow to Flaming Gorge. Just to kind of remind you how these charts work, time moves along on the x-axis. The forecasted volume is on the y-axis. The average and the median are plotted in the middle with those sort of greenish lines. The average is the solid one. The median is the dashed one. And then the historical max and min are the more frequently dashed ones. So 1986 is the high year here. 1977 is the low year. The official forecast is indicated with the red vertical line. The dot in the middle is the 50% forecast, and then the top number is the 10% forecast, and the bottom number is the 90% forecast. So our forecast is indicating there's an 80% chance or an 8 out of 10 chance that the observed April through July volume should be in between those two numbers. We're also including the daily ESP forecasts on here. The blue are the ones we've approved. The green are the ones that are not approved. In both cases, the convention is the same as the official forecast, with the dot in the middle being the 50% and then the 1090s plotted on the ends. So you can see both sort of how the forecast is changing over time, as well as how consistent the official forecast is with our guidance here. So the values themselves are in the lower right. For this point, the median forecast is 825,000 acre feet, which is 84% of average for inflow to Flaming Gorge. So to kind of move around the basin, looking in the upper Colorado, the headwaters leading down to Cameo. Here we're looking at 98% of average, 2.3 million acre feet, and a lot of the forecasts above this point are very consistent with that percent of average, as you can see by the map. Similar story in the Gunnison, also 98% of average, for Blue Mesa inflow, 660,000 acre feet. And then the San Juan's doing not quite as well, but still pretty close to average, 94% of average, 690,000 acre feet. So we add up the upper basin for the Lake Powell inflow. The forecast is for 6.81 million acre feet, or 95% of average. And then just to show how different the Great Basin is, 79% of average for the Weber and Oakley. And I could pick out a lot of points that look a lot like this. There is a lot of variation in this side of the range, or this side of the basin, but they're all not doing as well as the upper Colorado. The Virgin River, which flows into the Colorado in between Lake Powell and Lake Mead, only 62% of average down there. And then the lower basin, also not doing as well. The Salt River inflow to Lake Roosevelt is only 49% of average. So that's kind of the quick synopsis. Our online publication went out just before this call started. You can access it with the URL at the bottom. And the discussion, this is something new we started last year. We've always had a discussion, but we're started putting sort of more energy into this. And we have sort of one discussion for the entire area. I'm sort of showing that here. Wasn't complete when I took the screen capture. We were still working on it, but that discussion I think is done now. Yes, it is done now. So you can access that. We'll also be emailing that out to those of you that subscribe to our email list. So speaking of which, let me really quickly talk about what's new here at CBRC. This is our staff. Hasn't changed since last month. Our webpage has changed since last month. So you'll see that in a second. Recall that we heard from you, a lot of you, that our website needed to work better, needed to have a higher performance. Search features, something that people have asked for. Incorporating more information, being able to plot more information on maps. That's sort of what guided us in this. I should say it's gone live. This is an old slide. But this is a screenshot from the webpage and from the current water supply forecast. So I encourage you to go explore that. If you have feedback, we welcome that. Please send it to us. Send it to me. Webinar schedule. The next webinar will be February 6th, also at 1 p.m. You can register for all the webinars at once right there. And then our stakeholder meeting is coming up February 25th and 26th. If you haven't registered for that, if you're interested in learning more, you can contact myself, or Greg Smith is the primary lead for organizing that. We'd be happy to talk to you. We have an agenda posted on our website. Lots more information there. And then finally, the email list. I think you're all on this because you're listening to the webinar, but if you're not on the email list and you want to get on it, please let me know. We're using Google Groups. Our intention is to send out more frequent updates, something on the order of once a week or every other week or something like that throughout the season, kind of blog style entries that are abbreviated versions of our full publication. So we'll be trying that out this month and welcome feedback on that. So that's really all I got, and I will conclude and open it up for questions.
The conference is now in talk mode.
Are there any questions?
Good afternoon. My name's Paul Montoya, and can you put me on your list to receive information?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you shoot me an email?
Sure. Where do you want me to send it to?
So you can send it to the email address on the screen, kevin.warner@noaa.gov.
All right.
Thanks, Paul. And then I have one question that somebody typed in. Tom Ryan's asking to be reminded what ESP is. Sorry for the lingo. ESP stands for Ensemble Streamflow Prediction. That's our main forecast tool, especially for long lead forecasts. So I referred to it multiple times without defining it. I apologize, but that's what it is. Any other questions or comments?
Well, since you described that, could you describe briefly again the accepted and unaccepted?
Or approved or unapproved, all this? You mean approved and unapproved?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, let me go back to that chart real quick. Yeah, so let me show, this one is an example. So this is, again, the Flaming Gorge forecast. So when you go to our website, you'll only see the blue, you won't see the green, but I included the green here. I don't know why, I did. So we run ESP every day unless something's broken. So the periods of time when something is broken are indicated by these white gaps. During those periods of time, we do not run ESP because something is broken. Every other day we run ESP, and then as part of our forecast shift, the forecaster will look at the ESP forecast and either approve it or not approve it. If it's approved, it goes to the web and you can see it. If it's not approved, we think something's wrong that we want to go take a look at it. So we flag it, and those are indicated by the green. We also did not start approving this until November. So we were running them in October, but we weren't sharing them. So that's what the unapproved and approved is. Any other questions? Out there will be the usual 4-question survey. Fill that out, and if you do have comments for us, we receive one. So please take the time to do that. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.